Let me tell you a deep truth about the pressure we put on our children. We live in an age where we're constantly told to raise the bar, push harder, prepare our kids for a competitive world. And so we did. We bought the flashcards, signed them up for violin lessons, turned the evening routine into a military operation. We believed we were building grit, discipline, future leaders. But what happens when all that pushing doesn't build strength, but breaks something essential? When late nights are consumed by school projects while we Google, does burnout exist in third grade? There's a question few parents ever stop to consider. Where does guidance end and where does crushing pressure begin? Because beneath every high expectation, every "you can do better," every silent comparison with the neighbor's kid, there's an entire psychological architecture we're building inside our children. One that defines not just how they'll learn, but how they'll see themselves for the rest of their lives. And sometimes, in our attempt to prepare them for the world, we forget to ask, are we preparing them or are we breaking them? There's something subtle yet devastating about how excessive pressure slips into our homes. It rarely starts with tyrannical parenting energy. It usually starts with love. You see your child so full of potential, smart, curious, talented, and you worry. You want them to practice more, focus better, give their best. You want the good grades, the team placement, the resilience. But here's what no one warns you. Pushing kids too hard doesn't always sound like yelling. Sometimes it sounds like love, but lands like pressure. If you're not careful, those gentle nudges slowly begin to sound like conditions. Not "I believe in you," but "you're okay only when you win." "You matter more when you perform." "My love sounds a little different when you disappoint me." It's rarely said out loud, but it's felt because kids are professionals at making meaning. They're little data analysts with mental notebooks tracking the patterns of your reactions. And what they begin to hear is, if I mess up, maybe I'm not good enough. When a child starts believing that, something important switches off. They don't build motivation, they build anxiety, they don't chase growth, they dodge failure, and soon risk becomes dangerous. Not skydiving risk, I mean basic life risks. Raising their hand in class, auditioning for the school play, bringing you their bad science grade without bursting into tears or pretending it got lost in the black hole of their backpack. Because when success becomes the only option, they don't try harder. They try safer. They learn to mask, to pretend, to cheat on a test, to withdraw before auditions, to hide their report card in their hoodie sleeve and pray you're too tired to check. And it's not because they're lazy or manipulative. It's because somewhere along the way, success began to feel like the price of love. And that fear, the fear of not being enough, doesn't motivate, it paralyzes. And here's the scariest part. You might not notice it at first because it often shows up as compliance. As the good kid, the one who never argues, who gets perfect grades, who smiles politely and panics silently every time they make a mistake. That's not success. That's a child trying to outrun shame before bedtime. Now let me take you inside the brain for a moment. When your child is under stress, say you're standing over them saying, "Finish your math," their body isn't just mildly annoyed, it's in full fight or flight mode. Cortisol spikes, working memory shrinks, emotional regulation basically shuts down, and guess what turns off next? Exactly the part of the brain that helps them learn. That's right, the harder you push in that moment, the less they can absorb. It's like yelling at a sponge to soak up water faster. That's simply not how it works. Neuroscience research shows something very clear. Chronic stress can reduce learning capacity by up to 30%. A brain under constant pressure enters a state of hypervigilance, where cognitive resources shift away from the prefrontal cortex, responsible for complex thinking, toward the amygdala, the fear center. So when a child is overwhelmed and we double down with more lessons, more reminders, more pressure, we're not building discipline. We're literally training their brain to associate learning with panic. And once that neural connection forms, it becomes harder and harder to unwind. The child studying until 11 at night isn't necessarily learning more. They're learning that studying is suffering, that education is a threat. And the brain, in all its evolutionary wisdom, starts treating homework like a danger to avoid. Let's be real for a moment. A lot of the pressure we put on our kids isn't actually about them, it's about us. It's about our anxiety, our 3 a.m. mental spirals, our secret mental image of them failing a math test and somehow ending up in our basement at 42, eating cereal and calling us bro. We say we want the best for them, but sometimes what we really want is relief from our own fear. We're scared they'll fall behind, fail, or worse, that their struggle will somehow reflect on us. He didn't get into college. It must have been the bedtime routine. I should have started the flashcards in the womb. And look, that fear is valid. The world is competitive, school is hard. But here's the truth. No one tells you when you're doom scrolling parenting forums, when fear drives the show, parenting stops being guidance and becomes control. Control might get you short-term results. A clean room, a higher grade, a polite smile at dinner. But it comes at the cost of something far more important, long-term connection. Because kids aren't stupid. They notice, they can feel it in your tone, in your sighs, in your silence at the dinner table after a bad grade. They can feel when love starts to sound conditional, as if it's earned through performance. Get the A, get the smile, win the game, get the hug. Struggle, we'll talk later. And that's the moment everything shifts. It's when they stop coming to you when they fail. Because they've begun to believe your love might depend on their performance. Sometimes the child you're hardest on is the one already carrying the weight of your expectations on their back and still trying. They're not lazy, they're just tired of being a project. There's something especially insidious about the perfectionism we pass down to our kids. It's not always explicit. We don't always say, you must be perfect. But we communicate it in subtler ways. In the disappointment we fail to hide when they bring home a grade lower than excellent. In the way we celebrate success but overlook effort when it doesn't produce results. In the quiet comparisons with other children that seem so innocent. Megan's daughter won the math competition. You didn't say your child should do the same, but the message landed anyway. Perfectionism creates a devastating psychological trap. Kids learn that worth is contingent, that love is conditional, that mistakes are catastrophes instead of opportunities. And when that takes root, it creates adults who can never rest, who never feel enough, who measure their value through external metrics that never truly satisfy. Research shows that levels of perfectionism among young people have increased dramatically in recent decades. And with it, anxiety, depression, and burnout. It's not a coincidence. It's the direct result of a culture that has confused excellence with perfection, effort with outcome, worth with performance. So what's the alternative? Do we just stop pushing, let them play video games all day, and hope for the best? Not exactly. The goal isn't no expectations. The goal is healthy expectations. Instead of pressure, think partnership. Instead of control, think connection. That means asking why something is hard instead of assuming laziness. Creating space for failure without punishment. Celebrating effort, not just outcome. And teaching them to define their own version of success, not just ours. Because motivation built on fear collapses, but motivation built on curiosity lasts a lifetime. We want kids who want to improve not because they're afraid to disappoint us, but because they're genuinely excited to grow. A lot of people think that not pushing means raising soft, spoiled kids who can't handle life. We assume pressure builds resilience, but what scientists have discovered might completely change how you define strength. Resilience doesn't come from pressure, it comes from safety. Kids become resilient when they know it's okay to fall and that we trust them to get back up. That trust is the trampoline beneath their risk-taking. It's what gives them the confidence to try something hard without fear of shame. And yes, that means letting them fail sometimes, letting them forget their books at home, letting them forget their science project, because those moments teach natural consequences. They teach responsibility, but most importantly, they teach that failure doesn't mean abandonment. You want to raise a strong child? Raise one who knows they're loved even when they mess up. Now comes the hardest part, looking inward. If you were pushed too hard growing up, this whole topic might stir something in you. Maybe you still hear that voice in your head saying, not good enough. Maybe you still feel your worth depends on what you achieve. Maybe part of you thinks pressure is simply how people succeed. But what if it's not? What if your success happened despite the pressure, not because of it? What if the stress, the anxiety, the perfectionism you still wrestle with are actually proof that you needed more compassion, not more pushing? We can break that cycle. We can stop pushing our kids too hard and start showing them that love doesn't have to be earned. Because yes, we all want our kids to be strong, but let's redefine strong. True strength isn't about enduring everything. It's about knowing when to rest, when to ask for help, and when to let yourself be seen. That's the kind of strength that lasts. That's the kind of strength we should be building. So if you're watching this and thinking, damn, I've pushed too hard, don't spiral. This isn't about guilt, it's about growth. The most powerful thing you can do today isn't fewer lessons or more praise. It's stopping, reflecting, reconnecting. You don't need to fix every moment. You just need to show your child that you see them, that you're learning too, that their worth isn't conditional. Because one of the greatest lessons we can teach our kids is that we're still learning how to be good humans too. That love doesn't require perfection, that connection matters more than success, that being seen is more precious than being admired. That's the difference between a child who studies because they're afraid to disappoint you and one who studies because they're curious. Between one who practices violin to avoid your disapproval and one who practices because they love the music. Between one who lives in constant fear of not being enough and one who knows, deep down, that they already are, and that everything else is simply becoming. It's not that we lower the standards, it's that we change the foundation success is built on. No longer on fear, but on safety. No longer on pressure, but on possibility. No longer on control, but on connection. And when that foundation is solid, our children can build heights we never imagined, not because we pushed them there, but because we loved them enough to let them climb on their own, knowing we'd always be there, not to carry them, but to catch them if they fall. That's the kind of parenting that builds real resilience, not the hard endurance of pain, but the deep trust that no matter what happens, they are still worthy, still loved, still enough. Let me know in the comments if you ever find yourself pushing too hard with your child, and subscribe to the channel for more videos.